an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering the 7th book in the Cradle series, Uncrowned, Prologue, and chapters 1, 2, and 3. In these chapters, guys, I feel like I entered into an agreement with this author to trust him even when things seem terrible. And I let my faith slip at the end of the last book with Lindon being separated from his friends. And I'm ashamed, and I should have known better. My apologies forever. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Andy for commissioning this episode. So, we're beginning the next book. You guys, am I wrong, or is this the last book before, like, the most recent one that just came out this year? Is that true? Are there only 8 books in total? Oh, what am I going to do? Oh, I'm going to be scratching. Kids. I'm really worried about running out of these. Andy, what am I going to do? Andy says, but the next book is big. All right. I'll try and keep myself calm with that. Offer says, welcome to the club. I know this is one of those things that I get really spoiled, pun intended, by the fact that I don't have to wait often. I don't cover a lot of things that are currently coming out. So with Spoil Me, that's changed. You know, I had to wait for the next season of Dark. I am currently having to wait for another episode or another book of the Dandelion Dynasty, which if you guys like this and you're looking for something that's more intricate and really political, Dandelion Dynasty is fantastic. It's one of my favorite series that I've been covering. But it is a lot. It's a big series. There's only 2 books out so far, but the books are just humongous. So anyway, let me not waste time because I always run out when I'm covering these and there's so much to cover. First of all, let's talk about Whaaaa Lindon's family. It turns out things went real left for them. And I had honestly had forgotten. Mordecai says, love your makeup. Thank you. I'm wearing my blue for election day. I had forgotten about the, Heaven's Glory School going after them until I was re-listening with Owen. And, then we have that fucking horrible little 8-year-old kid whose name I forget that basically sends people at his family. And when I was rereading, so to speak, that one, and we came to that part, I was like, oh, right. I wonder what happened there. And I thought we wouldn't find out for quite some time because, of course, my assumption was that Lindon was going to have to go back there before we would ever know. And I didn't see him going back for quite some time. So we get around this by having Lindon need to take his journey in order to reach Underlord. And it's not really going like he planned, I don't think, because evidently there's something rotten in the state of Sacred Valley and he is losing power, is what he tells Lindon's sister. And that he feels that at this point he's no higher than a jade. And I am absolutely dying to know what this is about. I wonder if this has to do with the corruption that we saw in the animals in the woods around the Desolate Wilds. I wonder if this has to do with Lindon and the fact that he apparently was born unsold. Do these people have a harder time leveling up because of where they live? is it, did he just wind up really unfortunate with the place of his birth, and something about the location sapped everything away from him and it didn't for other people? Like, because it's really, when you step back and think about the fact that nobody in Sacred Valley has ever gotten past Jade, or hasn't in like recent memory, it is kind of surprising, considering that they seem to take like Ascension so incredibly seriously, and everything about their society is predicated on it, that nobody would have pushed themselves and really managed to get any further. And I don't know if the, power system, power grid, for lack of a better word there, is what causes them to not be able to progress any further. But it's a really, like, I was talking about this when we got to the Nightwheel Valley, how apparently where you live, just the privilege in that is so linked to how far ahead you can cycle and ascend, that seemed really like shitty and unfair, that some people just happen to be born in the wrong place, and it's just all down to fate. So this feels like very linked to that. And don't get me wrong, I still think everybody in Sacred Valley is absolute garbage, because look at the way they're treating Lindon's family. But I also feel like it's an interesting question that perhaps they got super unlucky in where their community happens to be. And that is part of why they have such profound ignorance about the sacred arts, that there's not a whole lot that they could have done without the knowledge required by going out into the world. And they can't go out into the world because they're too weak to get through the, sacred beasts that are like stalking the forests on the perimeter of their land. So it sort of becomes this like weird self-fulfilling prophecy. So anyway, Kelsa, she is trying to like ditch Orthos for a little while and go back to her family. And by family, I mean just her father, because she doesn't know Orthos well enough to trust him with the location of her family. But Orthos has his own ideas about how this all is going to go. And he follows her. And when she's just like, "How did you find me?" he practically laughs in her face and is like, "Y'all are only irons. Are you kidding me? I don't know how y'all are even still alive. It's like you're waving a flag. Here I am." And Kelsa is worried about her father's reaction. And Orthos is in the middle of talking, and he says, "You may as well all be blind," and then looks at her father and says, "At least he has an excuse." And she's really worried about how her dad's going to react to this, but he just starts laughing. Because apparently the Heaven's Glory people killed her mom. They took her mom. They stole her mom. They kidnapped her mom because she is a soulsmith and therefore valuable. They took her, and then they gouged out her dad's eyes as punishment. And the two of them had been left with like a guard on them in their home, but they decided to get the fuck out because they low-key weren't really sure if they were going to be kept alive for very long. They didn't know what was going to happen to them. So they wound up running off. It didn't seem like, their captors had cared that much about them until they tried to run away. And then all of a sudden, this is a fucking problem. So essentially, they are in hiding now with other people who are also exiled. And that brings up another major question for me, which is, why are they exiled? What's going on there? Who are they? Why are they here? And has this led to Lindon's family understanding the injustice of the society that they live in? Have they understood it? I mean, his sister at one point says something pretty interesting, which is like, they came and told us that Lindon had helped this sword artist escape. And we knew it was bullshit, but they can blame anything they want on a unsold. She says the clan leaders immediately gave us up to heaven's glory. They didn't even hesitate. All three of us were taken for questioning, and I went along. I thought they would let us go once they knew we had nothing to do with it. I didn't realize my parents had resisted. The school blinded my father as punishment, but my mother is a soulsmith. She was taken. And I was just like, oh man, when Lindon finds out about this, it's going to be ugly. And when I say ugly, I don't mean what Orthos means. Because Orthos says if your brother saw what they had done, he would burn everybody to ash. But of course Orthos says that because that's how he operates. That's how he knows how to interact with the world. Lindon is such a soft-hearted kid still in a lot of ways that I really don't know how we're gonna, how he would respond to this. You know, it's one of those things where I want him to simply be enraged on behalf of his family. But to be perfectly frank, on behalf of his family implies that he doesn't feel such crushing guilt for what happened to them, that he is more concerned with their approval of him. I am just so now they can do it as a honeymoon. Says Mordecai. Now they can do it as a couple. Sorry, guys. I'm reading the chat. I'm distracted. Yaren already going to wipe them out. Yeah, this is one of those things where I'm like, maybe do step aside and let Yaren handle this. And you go off with your family. Because I worry that Lindon is going to be so overcome with guilt that he isn't going to know what kind of action to take. I hope that he has grown past that sort of thing. But, his whole motivation for learning the sacred arts was so that I won't be worthless anymore. And he comes back with his power, thinking that he is going to be congratulated by his clan for ascending further than anybody from there. And he finds out instead that his family is on the run. His mother is a captive. His father has been blinded. And I truly want him to level the place. And it's not right because I don't Andrea says the Way clan is trash. I'm like, they are, but, for example, Kelsa she was brought up in that same place, but she seems to know right from wrong. There have to be some decent people, but does it matter when you get to this sort of point where everybody is willing to just turn somebody over on the say-so of this, and also I really want him to simply level the school. And the one dude who was really responsible for his family, being targeted in the first place is already dead. So that's not super helpful. Everybody, sure, they went along and they, quote, followed orders, which is absolutely despicable for sure. But I wonder what kind of satisfaction he's going to get and whether or not he's going to feel like he has ever set things right for them. And the one thing I can say is maybe he could make some awesome eyes for his dad and fix that. But yeah, it's such a shitty situation. And I'm really wondering what Orthos is doing here exactly. I'm hoping that he would burn them all to ash, but since he's barely a jade now, as he puts it, I'm concerned about that. And also he starts telling Kelsa about Lindon and how far he's gotten, and what he tells her sounds so outlandish that she begins to disbelieve his entire story. Because just the idea of Lindon, when he says, your brother isn't unsold, her response is, "Oh, so he made it through to Copper?" And when she said that, I like snorted. I was like, "Oh, right. You have no idea, do you?" But yeah, I mean, she has literally no idea. She can't be faulted for that. So I'm hopeful that because this sounds so out of the question to her, it won't cause her to completely lose faith in Orthos, because they need to listen to him very clearly. They need to do something because the shit is a mess. But, you know, I guess we'll see. So we are going to move forward here because I am not going to spend all of my time talking about the prologue, even though I kind of wanna. I'm trying to find, where is the... Uh-oh, I think my screen froze. Can you guys still hear me? Is everything cool? All right. So you know what? I'm going to go ahead and I'm trying to open the Kindle, but I'm going to go ahead and open it on my phone. So forgive me guys while I look at my phone because the app is freezing. So we go to Lindon, and the first chapter is him being tested by the beginning of the first chapter is Makiel, and he is figuring out about this bitch who robbed him. Now, Makiel, it turns out what this woman stole, these are versions of the Scythe that he has been working on, that are meant to be prototypes to what it's Ozriel, right? Ozriel's Scythe. They're supposed to, like, you know, be on the track of being able to do what Ozriel's Scythe can do. They can't. They are not up to that. But he felt like they were close enough that they were sufficiently dangerous to be put under complete lock and key. So this woman who steals them, it turns out that she's basically the only person that could possibly have done so, and he knew that. But when he looked into the future of how this could have worked, her, like, the possibility of her potentially doing this was so slim that he had just sort of dismissed it as a possibility. I'm trying to find this spot where it says that, but basically he makes the mistake that it seems like a lot of people in these books make, which is they trust the projections of like, you know, soothsayers and farseers and fate and whatnot. They trust that to a degree that causes them problems. And that's not to say that if I was living in this universe, I wouldn't also go to people who could see that sort of thing and try and figure things out, because of course I would. But what I am seeing consistently in this book series is that when you put all of your eggs in that basket, you are taking it's a risk that can cripple you if you go wrong. So we go into like Erie's head, because that is what Makiel does. He can like go into her POV and see what she saw at the time and hear what she was thinking. And it is just really creepy to me that he has this ability. I am assuming he can do this to anybody, and that he doesn't do it to everybody because he just doesn't have time. He's got a lot of shit to take care of. But with her, he's doing it because he's trying to figure out how she did what she did. And essentially, her biggest talent is waiting, because she just chills for 9 months before finally this place that she's trying to rob gets opened for her. There is nothing to be done. She can't open it, and she knows she can't open it. So she just has a fully fucking charged phone, and she got a backpack full of snacks, and she brought a pillow, and she is here to stay, motherfuckers, until she gets the shit she came for. And honestly, I admire the hell out of that, because I ain't got the patience of a fucking 5-year-old sometimes. And then there are times where I could sit and watch a blank wall, and it would be fascinating to me. It's all in whatever fucking mood I'm in at the time. And I like to think that those times, you know, maybe depressive episodes could pay off. Yeah, I don't want to get out of bed, but I don't have to, because I'm just waiting here for 9 months for somebody to show up and unlock this thing. So she gets this shit out, And then she does this like space movement where she basically changes where these objects are in space so that even when the security system goes off and alerts them, even were they to catch her, they would not get their shit back. And spoilers, they also don't catch her. She just like barely gets out of there. And when she gets out of there, it says, the Scythe of Ozriel was unique, and these were only pale imitations. It would take the greatest craftsmen in all the worlds to cobble them together into something resembling the original. Oh, I don't like the sound of that. That sounds like she's the greatest craftsman in all the worlds. I don't feel like that's great. I don't, you know? So this seems to be what Makiel thinks is responsible for the world that Serial found missing. It seems that he's like, okay, so obviously Ozriel isn't just out here going rogue and slaughtering worlds and annihilating them. So either somebody got his shit or somebody got one of my copies. And I think he knows nobody got his original because there are still fragments. And that's what Serial can see. And Ozriel's version doesn't leave fragments. So he's pretty certain it has to be one of his copies. And yeah, she has upgraded them, evidently. So yeah, I had a brief moment of just like, oh, but they're not real? Then we're fine. And then I'm like, oh, they're not real, but she knows how to like make them real. So then we go to Lindon. And Lindon is being tested by Akura Justice. Is this Justice? Yes. Okay. Akura Justice, aka Akura, I'm too old for this shit. This dude really comes in here with a fucking attitude problem, which we find out pretty much the entire Akura family is deeply fucking resentful of Lindon being here, which if I had really had a chance to like stop and mull over how this would be seen by them, I should have known that was coming. But it didn't really occur to me that Lindon being chosen by the sage meant that one of the actual blood isn't going to be in that spot. And of course they're going to be pissed about it. I just didn't even think of it. And oh my God, this dude, he walks up in here and he's basically like, okay, so I know that the sage knows what she's doing. I know that she's like really good because she's a sage, but let's be real. You aren't going to pass this test. So just get ready for that. He's like respectfully disrespectful. And he goes through these tests with Lindon and gets straight up shook. The first one is Lindon's lifeline, which he tests. And that shit is nearly blinding. It just, you know, he winds up like pulling the thing out of Lindon's skin that's measuring it because it gets so bright that they can't even see. So that right there, he's just kind of like, wow, that's insane, but I'm going to pretend that's totally fine. No problem. Okay. Even though we know that's unheard of. Lindon has drank that water and got that shit. So then he goes on to Madra. And he first senses Lindon's core. And he says, 2 cores. Plenty of people have tried that, but... And I'm like, word? Lindon doesn't have much of a reaction to that. And, you know, he's still writing his, like, Path of Twin Stars. And I'm like, Lindon, aren't you going to ask about that? But he's been, like, kind of told off already for talking out of turn, I guess, so. And he... this dude is like, yeah, well, you split your cores, but that just means that each core is going to be shallower than they would have been otherwise, which means it's going to be super inefficient and not even really that helpful. And then he senses the amount of Madra in Lindon's cores and almost hits the ceiling. And when he's talking later to Charity, he's just like, they're like lakes. I don't get it. It seems like each of Lindon's cores is deeper and fuller and bigger than one person's core would be ordinarily. So it's just he can't understand it. And we know that this is due to Ethan's cycling method, which did you hear me? Owen, which Lindon is still keeping secret, or attempting to. It seems like he is succeeding, though. And it's really interesting because everything that Justice tests him on and then reports later to Charity, because basically when he talks to Charity, he's like, all right, look, he's got an insane lifeline. He's got Modred's like cores that are just so large, it doesn't make any sense, which would be badass. But also I could sort of be like, well, some people get lucky. But then I did the mental tests and he made no errors at all. And I can't fucking figure it out. I don't understand. If I had the kind of ability that this kid has at that age, and then he sort of like goes off into a reverie because BT Dubs, while he's saying this to Charity, he's drunk. This moment that he has here with Lindon, it drove him to drink. And he is treating Lindon here. He calls him, all of that would be like luck, but not necessarily make someone a genius. And I'm thinking, well, okay, look, I love Lindon. Don't get me wrong. And I'm not trying to talk shit about my boy, but he's not a genius. He has gotten really fucking lucky. He was born into a shitty clan and got a bad hand. But then, once he left home, he weirdly stumbled into one situation after another that afforded him insane level ups. He got noticed by an Aurelius, which honestly was like probably one of the major things that got him where he is today. So I'm not trying to say that none of this is due to Lindon's own fortitude and determination, because of course many people might have given up when he didn't. Many people might not have let Ethan turn them into an iron with 5 fucking worth of venom. You know, granted. So it's not like none of this is due to Lindon's own personality and determination. But it's not only that. It's not all just because he was born gifted. He has gotten access to Northstrider's whole territory, and nobody else that we know of got access to all of the things for as long as he did. And of course, these people don't know about this at all. Like, Charity knows some of it, I imagine, because she was able to see a lot of what went on. But, you know, we know that the results of a lot of this are due to level ups he's gotten from external sources that he was able to make the most of, either due to his own like personal discipline or due to gifts from the Aurelius family. The Blackfire training was a fortune to put him through those paces. What Ethan feeds them all at the end of the last book, the pill that helps him like get to the edge of Underlord, he said something about how like incredibly valuable those pills are. And he had to pay for them out of his own pockets at that point, but still he was able to do that because he can generate these scales. There's just a lot about the way that he is described here by this guy that I'm like, you think that this was how he was born. He apparently thinks that Lindon just is gifted the way that Mercy was gifted at birth. And Mercy is, also, she was clearly gifted at birth based on the stories about how they had to like shield her spirit and whatnot. But she was also given every fucking advantage. So, I'm just saying credit where it's due, but also behaving as if this guy is just like a prodigy out of nowhere is dishonest also. And this is such a it's just a really good analogy for privilege and capitalism and having access to the tools to get ahead when other people don't have them. So anyway, it's still, I will say, deeply satisfying to see Lindon puzzle this guy so badly. When this guy comes in with the attitude he does, and combined with how we have seen Lindon be treated in the past when people didn't take him seriously, it's so nice to have him, like an official of this level, be baffled. And for Lindon to have Dross, like, answering these questions. Dross is like, ooh, a game. We get to play a game. I love games. This is awesome. It's really funny. I wish that we had gotten to see some of those mental games. Of course, I knew that, Dross was going to get him through and it would be no problem. But I would have liked to just see, like, how those went. So, yeah, that's how that goes. And Akura Charity is just like, so, you have your doubts put to rest? Because I know that she basically could tell that he didn't think that shit was going to pay off, that he didn't think that Lindon was going to be up to the task. And she's a little bit gloating about it, which I don't blame her for. So then we go to Yeren and Ethan, and Yeren is doing some training. Yeren's not in a great place. She is really trying to do her duty and keep it together, but she's frustrated at being here alone. So it feels to her. She is up against Ethan the first time, and what the theme becomes as we go on with her, like, POV, is that she feels there is nobody optimally powered for her to train against that will be enough of a match for her to push her forward without being so overwhelming or so badly matched that they actually don't help at all. And it, seems like that is borne out in the way that we see this all go. So she's with Ethan and she is sparring with him. Sparring seems like too mild a word, but we'll go with sparring. And there is a crowd surrounding them, watching this, like, underlord fight training session. And she has this feeling, and I love this so much. I'm trying to find the spot where she says this. But basically she had, like, oh yeah, here it is. She was an underlady now, but instinct told her this was a fight she still couldn't win. Her fingers did not shake, but she trembled on the inside. So, Yeren's got an inkling that basically there's more to Ethan than what he shows. She's not an idiot, and she doesn't know why, and there's no, like, evidence, but she has a sense of just like, yeah, he's got something up his sleeve. And they go at each other, and he is able to evade every movement of hers, everything. And it really doesn't seem like it's, like, much effort for him to do it either. Yeren didn't see how he evaded the third attack, only that he did. Her spiritual perception was locked on him, and he ended up on his back foot. So she goes hard, and Ethan stood nearby, unharmed. He whistled. If I didn't know better, I'd think you had some unresolved aggression against me. Would you like to talk? Yeren ground her teeth. This wasn't enough. The Akura clan would be preparing Lindon and Mercy for the Uncrowned King tournament in 9 months. If she wanted to keep up with them, she had to break through her limits. So she goes in with her blood shadow at this point. She's super frustrated at having to do it, but she knows that she's going to have to embrace this aspect of it. And they finally kind of go, first, at least on her end, she gets pretty serious with her attack. And finally, he is able to stop the attack with pure Madra. And he tries to say that, oh, that was a good job on her part. He was trying not to use any techniques, but she made him. I have some pointers and a few insights. And she grabbed him by the collar. And she basically gets in his face and is like, you have to stop and get serious because I need you to push me, and this isn't enough. This isn't doing it. She says, I don't have a dross. I don't have a sage left to light my way. All I've got left to help me is you, so I need you to stop holding back. Careful what you wish for, Yaren. So, suddenly, the air gets heavy. Her spirit screams a warning, and she turns around to see Ethan. Basically, her blood shadow just explodes. And she is looking for him, and she's like, but where is he? And she turns around, and he's directly behind her, right behind her. His smile was gone. His eyes twin needles of ice. His hostility was so thick she could taste it. A fist squeezed her spirit, and it was all she could do to keep her madra circulating. She gathered a rippling sword at the edge of her blade, whipping a quick striker technique at him. Ethan did nothing to stop it. The madra cracked against invisible armor that coated every inch of his skin. He pointed his finger up, and only then did Yaren realize there was something above her. She leapt back, but the seething cluster of blue-white stars against the ceiling followed her. She raised her sword, filling it with madra. A cascade of blue-white light speared down, powerful enough to drive right through her spirit. It lanced into the ground in front of her. When the light faded, the floor was completely unharmed. And she asks him, "What are you?" To which Ethan says, "I'm an underlord. And I am not out here just trying to get to the next level. I am out here making the most of the level that I am fucking at right now. And a lot of these little clowns out here ain't doing that shit. And you can tell." And it's great. A child and a veteran swordsman given the same weapon are vastly different opponents. With enough skill, there's no reason you couldn't do what I just did in your own way. And she's like, word? Okay. And that is the end of that chapter. So then we go into 2. And we have this this moment with Lindon following Mercy into the room that he is going to be competing with or training with other Akura family members. Basically, we meet her younger brother, if I'm not mistaken, Pride. And Pride is one of those, it feels like he took a bad turn. It feels like him and Mercy had a good relationship. She went away. He got embittered by this. And now he has a fucking problem with her. And he's trying to act like it's not a problem with her because I'm sure that it's to his advantage that they have a close relationship. But clearly he feels a way, and especially feels a way that she's apparently friends with this fucking interloper. It looks like they came in together, for all intents and purposes. And oh God, we have this moment with Charity, and she says, only one of you will earn the ultimate honor, and that one will fight as a part of a team with these two. I thought it fair that I introduce them. So yeah, everybody is here to train and get chosen because the third Akura family member has not yet been selected. Now, I'm going to say it's going to be Pride, simply because that feels like something that would happen, if you're writing a story and he's like the one named family member and somebody that one of the other teammates has a previous relationship with, that makes sense. But sometimes this author surprises me with the total lefts that they take, so we'll see. Lindon expected the crowd of ambitious young underlords to look eager for the opportunity to fight to be the equal of Mercy, BT dubs. They seemed to lose all their spine when their eyes fell on Mercy, shifting in place, staring into the ceiling, clearing their throats, or fidgeting uncomfortably. I love this because as readers, we have a privilege of seeing exactly what Mercy's deal is, but Lindon has never seen that. So this is the first that he's really getting of how insane her abilities are. And he doesn't quite get it because he's never seen it really for himself, you know? So this is when Mercy tries to hug Pride, and Pride basically tells her, get the fuck off me. And this is when Charity introduces Lindon to the crowd. I have called him here in order to repay that debt with service. There were the hungry looks Lindon had expected earlier. Every lord and lady in the room eyed Lindon like they couldn't wait for Charity to leave so they could tear him to pieces. His spirit shivered more than once as they scanned him. And this is when Pride basically shows out and is like, really? This guy? You picked him? And I was a bit surprised at the attitude he was willing to take with a sage. Like, he keeps being like, you know, apologize, but I'm trying to be, you know, he's like trying to cloak it. Again, it's the respectful disrespect. And everybody starts sort of like chiming in a way with like agreement. And, the sage let a whisper of her spirit move over the room, which quieted all speech. I trust none of you will waste too much of Lindon's time or Mercy's. Over the next 9 months, we will be training them even harder than we train the rest of you. At the end of that time, my father will hold a competition to select the final competitor of the Uncrowned King tournament. I suggest you all try your hardest to distinguish yourselves. So, she asks Mercy if Mercy can handle them, and Mercy's like, duh. And then Pride decides that he is going to challenge Lindon. And Lindon, personally, is like, good. I can make myself look weak, and then it will seem like I'm not worthy, and they will send me home. And I was just like, Lindon, sweetie, have you not learned anything? Of course that's not what they're going to do. She knows what you're capable of. She'll know if you held back. She's not sending you anywhere, kid, so stop it. But he lets himself kind of look bad. And also Pride is a substantial foe. So it's really not that hard for him to like wind up taking a beating. It's not a ton of pretense. So he looks bad enough that Pride, when Uncle Fury comes into the room, is like, do you see this shit? This is the guy she picked. Are we doing this? And honestly, Fury is such an interesting character because it just doesn't seem like he matches his name. None of them, like, except for Pride, seem to match their name. Malice doesn't seem malicious. Charity doesn't seem particularly charitable. You know, it makes me wonder how Mercy and Pride's names match up so well. And it says, a man walked into Lindon's view laughing sheepishly as though he felt guilty about something and was trying to laugh it off. I am so curious what that's about. Does he feel guilty for, like, what, was he involved with selecting Lindon? Like, what's that? And he says when Pride tries to be like Charity made a mistake, I taught Charity myself when she was a girl. She's always had good eyes. And Lindon tries to protest here and stands up and is like, I don't think I'm worthy either. I don't think that I should be here. And Pride is shocked. You know, as far as he's concerned, Lindon is another, like, what do you call it? Ladder climber. You know, everybody wants to get close to the Akura clan. Everyone wants to get their hands on the resources of the Akura clan. It's not surprising at all to him that this interloper is here or would want to be here. And the idea that they're here and not interested, it seems like when Charity said he owed us a debt and I'm basically calling in my marker, he didn't really take her at her word on that. And I think he believes she's just doing this dude a favor. And it's just kind of funny to know that, like, he couldn't be more wrong. Like, Lindon would rather be anywhere else. So I'm going to jump ahead a little bit here. And Lindon is like finally sent to his home, and it turns out that he's given an entire house. Now, this is the way, when I said that I should have had more faith in Will White, this is what I meant, because you have to do a lot to make it feel worthwhile to me that Lindon and Yaren get separated. And Will did two things to help mitigate the pain for me. One, he made sure that Mercy was with Lindon. And as much as I want him and Yaren together, and I know that that is where they should be, I am super curious about Mercy and how she grew up and what her abilities could be. And I am delighted to be able to like spend more time with her in that respect. Secondly, White has Lindon get the resources of this insanely rich family. And that's really one of the only things that eases the blow of them being apart. Lindon gets access to not only this entire home and a basement that is like optimized for cycling and training, but also access to all kinds of elixirs, another parasite ring when he lost his just the last book, or in Ghostwater, I guess, so 2 books ago. And just basically anything he could want that is accessible and not like, you know, Archlord level rareness, they have and will give him for nothing, no problem. And that's pretty boss. You know, this is really like when I said that everything up until now, it felt like was a result of him catching the eye of Ethan. It feels like going forward, it may be due to him catching the eye of Charity, which I can't help but wonder if that wasn't Ethan's plan, because he doesn't seem worried or surprised at the fact that Lindon has been taken out of the running for his little group of 3. He might have planned for it to be the others, but you know, who knows? Who knows how Ethan's fevered mind works? So yeah, Lindon, like when he gets brought to the house and he's like, which room should I take? And she's like, no, not room. This house is yours. Also, we're going to have a staff that will cook and clean. And we have gardeners so that like the grounds are really nice. And I was just like, what the fuck? Y'all, can you imagine what we would all be capable of if we had servants? Like, we could all, we would have all this free time. What kind of art would exist? What kind of society would we have? Ugh. And granted, that means servants are in a bad position. So we would have to have like robot servants, but fine, sure. So let's see. As long as it isn't a problem. Oh yeah, here it is. Could I trouble you for some clothes? And please let me know if this is too much, but I could use some mental enhancement elixirs, Madra restoration pills, and if you can spare one, a parasite ring. And I should mention, Madra restoration pills, whatever Pride's weapon is, it hurts his spirit. It's like painful in a way that he hasn't experienced before, and it's a little worrying. So we'll see what that's about. And she says, of course, will there be anything else? Lindon didn't hold back. Yes, as long as it isn't a problem. I'd like as many high-quality pure Madra scales as you can find, some firewood, a hot meal whenever is convenient for you, sealed water jugs, preserved travel rations. And basically, when she brings everything, he puts almost all of it into his void key, which is so smart. Can I tell you guys how much I appreciate, as a person who plans and loves planning, how much I appreciate a character in a book having the same instinct to plan ahead that I have? I love it so much. He's just like, all right, well, I'm going to need everything that I would need to survive out on my own because God knows what the fuck is going to happen here. And that I'm going to like down to the last detail. I would love it if he wound up with like the tent remember the tent Mercy had at Ghostwater? And it just was super cozy and just like, it's like a Harry Potter tent, you know? So he opens his void key and the river seed comes out and she is pissed. And she basically like curses at Lindon, I would imagine. You can't understand what she's like. He can't understand what she's saying. Dross seems to. But she basically comes out and is like, you worthless motherfucker. I cannot believe you left my ass in there this entire time. Where even are we? I have no idea what's going on because somebody didn't fucking update me. Like, she's real mad. And when he asks for her help, has to like convince her. And at first he thinks that he can just feed her all these Madra scales. And she's like, no, you're not buying me off. You make me a scale. Go ahead, do it. And honestly, I loved that. That was like somebody trying to just buy you a present to apologize. And you're like, you could just buy me a present, but that's really easy. So how about you dig me a 10-foot hole and then we'll consider that an apology. So he does it and feeds it to her. And she apologizes and jumps up on the side of his neck and suddenly feels the injury to his Madra channels and begins to repair them with this like urgency and this excitement that says to me that this damage he sustained is more than what he has doing other things in the past. This doesn't feel like the same thing that happens, for example, when he uses Black Flame. She seems really agitated by it. Her Madra helped, but it was a bit like throwing a bucket of cold water on a sunburn. He hissed and gritted his teeth, his spine straightening. Spiritual pain wasn't necessarily any worse than physical pain, but it was much harder to ignore. And finally, it begins to dissipate. And Dross finally is like, what is that? Do you feel that? And all of a sudden, here comes fucking Akura Charity to basically make me regret calling her a bitch, even though I kind of still don't. All right. Look, Charity, you have your reasons. I respect them. You're not wrong. But also, fuck you, though. Still, really. So she shows up and Dross, which Lindon tries to pull Dross back into his own spirit, and Dross doesn't go anywhere. And I can't decide whether that's Dross resisting Lindon, which I don't love that, or if it's Charity managing to prevent Dross from going back into his spirit, which seems more likely to me, but also I don't like that either. I don't like either of these. And when she sees Dross, she's like, now some things are making sense. I could tell that you were advanced, but I didn't really get it. And now I'm starting to get it. And she basically is like, you clearly have a lot of advantages, and yet you lost today. And I know that, come on, you weren't going to lose. Not against Pride like that. Nah. What is going on? And he says at this point, I'm lacking basic knowledge and skills. Your underlords are not. If Pride were my enemy, I might find some ways to stop or defeat him. But within the confines of a judged duel, I am afraid I am truly not his match. So this is really the crux of what's happening in this part of the book, it feels like. And this is something that happened, at the end of the last one. Lindon realized that his combat training wasn't up to snuff. He had grown very strong, and he was able to get on the top 100 True Golds list. But, there was still, Yeren was way ahead of him. And he knew in a way that he had this disadvantage, but he was hoping that sheer power would begin to, overtake it and make it not matter too much anymore. And he's finally realizing, no, that training is crucial. I can't really get around needing that. And so what it looks like we're doing here is finding a in-plot, reasonable, smart way to give Lindon time off from the kinds of immediate threats to his life that he had been dealing with, and focus on schooling in a way that's really interesting and feels like very specific. And I don't know. I think that this is a really smart move, and it works so well within the plot. It just makes so much sense that it feels really satisfying to me in a way. So she looks at him, and then she finally says, "You don't know what we're fighting for, do you?" And he says, "For the pride of the Akura clan." And she says, "And you don't feel such pride, so you do not value it." And he doesn't know how to like respond respectfully to that, even though pretty much she nailed it. That's exactly right. And he says, "If the reputation of the clan affects the survival of nations," and she interrupts and says, "It does. It affects your nation. The Uncrowned King tournament is an exhibition of our future military power. If the Dragon King believes we are weak, he will take what he wants from us. If other great families believe we are weak, they will not help us. There is no sense investing in a loser. They want the Black Flame Empire." Lindon didn't want to believe her. He wanted to think she was lying to him in order to motivate him to fight. But she didn't need to lie. She could simply order him to do as she wished, and he would have no choice but to comply. And he says, "How far do we have to make it?" And she says, farther than the gold dragons. But there's far more at stake in the tournament than this. If at least one of you does not reach the top 8 and become one of the Uncrowned, preferably Mercy, then we may find ourselves in great danger. And he's like, "Okay, so then why me? I'm a total stranger. Why would you put everything on me?" And she's like, "Let it be enough that I think you can win. Will you stop the charade, or will you allow others to decide what happens to your home?" And really, when you get right down to it, there's nothing she could have said that would be more motivating to him than that. She's essentially like, "These bitches are coming for your family. I thought that was the whole reason you got into this game." She doesn't think that, but I do. "Doesn't this feel a little bit relevant?" And finally, he's like, "Okay, fine." I love Dross being like, "Well, we don't know that the dragons wouldn't be better rulers than you." And when Lindon agrees, Dross is like, "Okay, good, thank God." Because I was lying. I'm sure that they will be worse rulers. They're very cruel. They're bad. So Lindon thought back to the fight with Pride. The other underlords had watched him with disdain and jealousy. They would be coming for him. He felt more pressure from that than he had before. Only minutes ago, he would have been satisfied with disqualification. So this is when she talks about how he is going to be undertaking a lot of training, and she gives him this weird dream tablet that has like a test within it. And she tells him it's copper level, and he's sort of like balks at that. But I was like, "Lindon, look. It's basically like you don't know how to read. Yeah, they're giving you kindergartner level stuff. You just shut up, take it." And he eventually does shut up. And it does take him the same amount of time that it took Mercy when she was a copper to get through it, which humbles him a little bit in that respect. Also, Dross asks Charity for some of her Madra, and she gives it to him, which is very shocking both to Lindon and to Dross. And it seems like that, it's like, I'm sure a combination of her thinking that this will be helpful to Lindon and she's investing in Lindon. But also I can't help but wonder if there isn't just some curiosity there. If she wonders like, all right, give some Madra, see what happens. I would like to know, you know. It's just such a moment of like, him asking just is so rude, and he seems like aware that it's rude, but he can't resist just for the shit of it, just being like, "Well, she says no, whatever," you know? So this is when he like senses somebody who is upstairs about to try and challenge him. And there's a moment here where he basically resigns himself to, "I'm going to lose. I'm just going to be losing hard here. And I kind of have to accept the fact that I am going to lose because it's easier to kill than it is to compete in this sort of way. And by doing the losing, I will learn how to win. And that's a good that's a good approach, you know? So then we go to, and I can't get into the like copper test, but basically it's like he has to identify different techniques by sight, which is really hard. And he doesn't want Dross to do it for him because he doesn't want to be totally dependent on Dross, which is a really smart move and not one that I think I would have thought of. But it's just a good idea to not need totally Dross just to like identify something as basic as this. We go to Seshkunaj. Oh, I hope I'm saying that right. And we just get a little background on him and the way that he had a brother who was like overpowered, and his brother was human. And Seshkunaj, I'm just going to call him Sesh. He was a dragon, but made to look human, and they were like presented together as if they were actual twins. And Shesh's like look was just a result of a gold sign, which I thought was interesting. And his brother accidentally killed a kid, and he is held responsible even though in many lands he wouldn't be. The laws of this nation prohibited the murder of anyone regardless of advancement, and the young victim was the descendant of a powerful clan. To this day, the king of dragons walks the desert in the form of a human boy, hair dark and skin tanned by the sun. He admires humans, but hates human civilization, that collection of unnatural rules under which the weak are favored above the strong. So basically, his brother murdered a kid, and he feels that their fleeing and his brother's execution is just super duper unfair. His brother couldn't help it that he was way stronger. Accidents happen. These people are bullshit. Which is honestly kind of like so hilarious to me. That he's just like, oh God. I guess they just die. Who cares? Whatever. What a dick. So then we go to Yeren again. And we get a little bit of Narusea. And I'm out of time, so I'm only going to do the briefest, but it's basically Narusea and Yeren, and they are trying to train off one another, but they each have fighting styles that don't really aid in pushing either one of them forward particularly, and they're both getting really frustrated at the lack of options here. So, let's see. Yeren is like, talking to her about the fact that she is just young enough to actually qualify. And this box appears in front of them as they're talking and opens. And there is this moment where Seiya is just like, we have to give Aethan his share. And Yeren's like, get out of here. Aethan's about to walk in any second. He's like right there. And indeed, he does swoop in a moment later. And it's like, Seiya reaches out and carries him with her like wind madra, and we find out that Aethan was trying to like kind of sneak in and do this impressive entrance and overextended himself a little bit, and just like, oh God, thanks for the lift. I thought I had that and I kind of didn't. Oh my God, that is so funny to me, you guys. The idea that he's like, oh, I'm really gonna get him, and then he's just like hanging on outside in the wind like, oh God, this is a bad idea. Now, I don't really necessarily believe that he was stranded. I think he lets himself look weaker than he is frequently in order to make everyone around him feel a little bit more comfortable. But nevertheless, that's a funny image. So, yeah, top grade scales, dream tablets, they each get a bunch of different things. And let's see. Aethan is asking Yeren what she got when she was fighting Seiya, like what kinds of insights she got. She says, I need a better answer to fast feet and good eyes. Same thing as when I'm fighting you. If I can trap them in with the endless sword and stop them from running around, I'll win. If they slip past me and land a hit, I'm dead. And he says, how would you solve that problem if you got any wish? And she says, I'd take your ability. And he says, would you like my help? And she's like, you fucking always ask questions when you know what the answers are already, and you leave people with impossible choices. And then he seems to sense what she's thinking, and he's like, look, I do believe that you're going to be able to do this with my help or without. However, if you think that I will be able to help you more than you would be by yourself, like, then ask for my help. If you want me to not help you and you really feel like it's important that you figure it out, I will respect that too. And it's a moment of like real sincerity from him that, let's face it, we don't really get that often, as much as I love Ethan. So at this point, they begin this train, and I can't get into this too much more. But yeah, there's this message. He says, let's see, what did they pack for you? Combat records and manuals from the main house Aurelius on the rose gold continent. And she says, I thought you grew up here. And he says, I was born there, raised here, returned there. What was the message? I will tell them to hold on, Ethan said softly. Help is coming. Something in the box caught his attention, and he reached down, brushing aside his manuals to find a letter. And look, a letter from the sage herself. She hopes we will find these simulated opponents useful, and some other things, I'm not entirely interested, and intends to retrieve us in approximately 8 months after the Rising Earth and Frozen Blade teams. At least we have a time limit. And Yaren, when she hears the Frozen Blade School, is like, what? Are you serious? And he's like, oh, you know the sage, don't you? And she says, like an arrow that missed my neck, my master almost married her. And that is the end of that chapter. So much ground covered, you guys. So much. This section was slightly over 50 pages because of the way that the chapters fall. So it stopped at 64 pages. The next section, I'm going to go 4 through 8. So that'll be almost exactly 50 pages, a little bit less. And I'm just trying to make sure that I have this here. So then we'll go up to 158, so until chapter 11. Next chapter will be up to 13, up to 14. And yeah, this one divides up almost perfectly equally into 50s, because it only goes up to like page 320. So we'll be good, I think. And I'll try and go on the like shorter side with the last 2 sections, as I did last time, and divide it up into smaller, like 40-page increments. That way I have more time to talk. Because I'm always over time every single time. Every time. All right, guys. Thank you again so much for hanging out with me. And I hope that you all are enjoying the coverage. Thank you again to Andrew for commissioning this. And I'll be seeing you again in half an hour with the magicians. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.